Okay, now that you're all set up, ready to go, the next lecture is on composition. But before we go, I just wanted to leave you with this really tacky cliche: great photos are made, not taken, which is kind of true though, because you find a lot of the best photos aren't just auto mode. They've had a lot of thought put into them. Do you want it to be brighter or darker? Composition, do you put your subject off on the side? Do you want the blurry background or not? There's a whole array of different things under your control to make the photo come out the way you want, rather than the way auto mode gives it to you. So that's what we're going to look at from now on. Composition. In this lecture, we're going to have a look at how you organize things in your photo just so that it feels more balanced or complete. So we're going to have a look at my top 10 composition tips, starting with what you'd think would be an obvious one: try to make sure your horizons are horizontal, but some people just have an inability to hold the camera square, and every single photo they take is just a little bit wonky. Sometimes they say, oh, it doesn't matter, it's digital, surely we can just rotate it and crop it later on. But you'd be surprised how much you lose in a picture when you rotate it and crop it. Just because it was all in there when it was wonky doesn't mean it'll be all in there or look any good by the time you've cropped it. You lose huge wedges off every corner. You also lose quality on your image. Obviously photos are horizontal and vertical rows of pixels, and if you have to rotate it a little bit and then save it back into horizontal and vertical rows, of course some pixels get smeared from here to here and you just lose a bit of clarity. So you're better off getting it right in shot. My best technique for that is really just look for something that's supposed to be horizontal, like a horizon, and then try and just check that it's parallel with the bottom of your viewfinder. Just match it up just to check it's parallel. Or a building that's supposed to be vertical, just check it matches up with the side of your viewfinder. A lot of cameras these days have that inbuilt digital level, which is handy as well. But the main thing is just spend a couple of seconds to make sure your photo is square, because it ruins a lot of photos and you don't want to have to try and fix it later. Rule of thirds. You've probably heard of this one before. It's a pretty important composition rule. It's basically saying that, yeah, here's a nice enough photo of a hiker walking along a beach, but for some reason, this just feels a little bit nicer. It's a little more balanced. It's hard to work out exactly why, but in its simplest form, the rule of thirds is saying, try not to just put your subject slap bang in the middle of the photo, as tempting as it is. It normally looks nicer if you can deliberately put your subject off on the side, give it some space in front of it. Now what's actually going on here is the rule of thirds. That's just where in your head you mentally divide your viewfinder up into these vertical and horizontal thirds and just trying to range as much as you can of your photo around those lines. So if you've got a strong horizon, you might put that on the bottom third or the top third, depending on which bit of the photo needed more space. Or if you're putting your subject off to the side, you might move them off to this third or the other third. Another example here, see it's just in the middle, it doesn't look that exciting. It just looks a whole lot nicer when you pull it off to the side. In fact, where those third lines intersect, there's 4 points in a photo there. If you can put the key bit of your image, either your subject or the key bit of your subject, on those intersection points, that's a really powerful point in the photo and it looks really good. Sometimes you can have a bit of a dilemma as to which side of the photo do you put your subject on, which third, and you can just try and remember it as always try and give your subjects room to move into or see into. You know, if they're looking or moving in a direction, no one cares about what's behind them, what's been and gone. They want to see forward. So you crop out all the stuff behind them, give them extra space in front. Some people call that nose room. You know, you're just giving space in front of things. That's the same thing as rule of thirds. Of course, we all have a bit of a problem now, because in the previous lecture we all went and put our center autofocus point on, so the camera was only going to focus what's in the dead center of the shot. And now here I am saying, oh, but it looks so much better if you put your penguin off on 1/3. Now, what that does mean is you do point directly at your subject first of all while you're focusing, beep, and then after it's found that focus lock, keep your finger half pressed, and then you can reframe the shot and put your penguin off on the third or whatever you want for good composition before you depress the button all the way down to get the shot. Obviously, otherwise, if you start off with your penguin off on the side and you try and half press to focus, it's just going to focus on the sky behind the penguin and you end up with a blurry subject. So you point directly at your subject to start with. Ideally, you focus on its eye. Actually, that's a good side tip. If you're ever photographing a person or an animal and you can see their eye in the shot, that's where you've got to focus on. That's the important part that has to be sharp. So here you'd just be focusing on the eye of the penguin, half press, beep, until it gets to focus. Then you keep your finger half pressed while you reframe to the side, rule of thirds, and then you press the button all the way. Perfect. So there you go, that's how you use that center autofocus point to allow you to focus on exactly what you want in your image, but you can still then recompose and put it wherever you want in the photo before you take the shot. That's why you have that AFS, or single shot focus, rather than the tracking system. I think about the only exception to the rule of thirds are reflection photos, where you don't feel like you have to put that horizontal division on the top or bottom third, because the symmetry of what's going on is what make those photos beautiful anyway. But I think in the vertical plane, it still applies. But the key part of the photo where your eye is drawn to is obviously that tree fern. So that's in the top third corner and bottom third corner. Kind of balances it out, vaguely still fitting the rule of thirds. So try and imagine this is a view out the back of a boat that you're on, and you're trying to get a nice, postcard shot of this bird and the sunset and things like that, using the rule of thirds. Have a think in your head how you might frame that up. Hopefully you're thinking something along the lines of that. You can see your horizon is obviously your strong bottom third, the clouds make the top third line, there's our little bird, he's the subject, he's moving into the shot, so we want to give him space to move into, so we move him off to that right hand third. But then you'll have some people jump up and down and say, oh, but you missed the lovely golden lighting over there and the blue sky up the top, what about that? And it just goes to show that the world doesn't always fit into 9 magic boxes, and you've often got to make a call between good composition and trying to fit everything in. And I really think it's always important to try and have good composition. People don't know what they're missing if you don't include it in the photo, but what you include, it's got to look nice. Framing is another good tip. This is good for your landscape photos particularly. Framing is when you deliberately include something up close in your photo. It tends to make it seem a bit more 3D, gives it a lot more depth. It also stops your eye falling off the edge of the photo. You kind of frame it or hem it in by putting something along the edges and the sides.